New laws take effect today, giving workers the right to disconnect when they're off the clock. The rules apply to any Australian business with 15 or more staff, with hefty penalties for those flouting the new laws. To explain more, we're joined by employment expert and Managing Director at Employee Matters, Natasha Hawker. Good to see you.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, Natasha.
Just how drastic of a change is this going to be to people's thinking around the communication we have between workers and organisations?
Yes, well, I think, Bridget, what's happened is the lines have blurred between home and the workplace as a result of technology. I mean, our phones are so hard to ignore, and also from COVID, because we ended up doing so much work from home, so that line or that break when you used to go and get on the bus isn't there anymore. So I think a lot of that has started to happen, and what we do know is that our stress claims are increasing from a workers' comp perspective. People are much more stressed at work. So I think that's what we're starting to see happen, and that's going to be a problem.
Okay, so let's start with employees. What can they expect today under the new laws in regards to communications from their bosses?
Well, it's going to be very interesting. It's up to them, but now workers have the right to ignore monitoring, reading or responding to their emails and their contacts. And it's going to be really interesting because it's up to the employee to go, hang on a minute, Bridget, I actually don't want to take that call from you. But it's not only them, it's actually their clients and suppliers as well. And so the implications for them are going to be quite high if they start to do that right.
Are businesses aware? Has there been enough communication about this?
I don't think businesses are aware. Okay. Like all these things, there's always a lot that actually needs to happen. It's not sufficient just to change a policy. So what you need to do is you actually have to, I would suggest, roll out a right to disconnect policy. You've got to educate your managers to know that they don't or shouldn't be contacting their people anymore. You need to have job descriptions and make sure those job descriptions are accurate. So, for example, for very senior employees that have global roles, they're still going to be able to do their global roles at night. And you also need to check the employment contracts as well. So there's a lot of change here that needs to happen, and I think it's cultural change as well.
Lots of comments rolling in from our viewers this morning. This one from Carl I was really struck by. He said, the tech sector relies heavily on unpaid on-call calls and notifications being expected to be dealt with 24/7.
Yep.
I suspect the tech sector is going to have a real wake-up call and having staff on call rotations. It's currently being abused massively, so that's really interesting. What other sectors do you think will be affected by this?
I think there's going to be a lot in the trades as well, where people just call people late at night. I think the interesting thing is that the Australian Institute did a study, and this is back in 2023, and they found that on average, Australian workers did 5.4 hours of unpaid overtime per week. You know, that's sort of 260 hours per year. So what the employment lawyers are expecting is an increase in those claims around trying to get those underpayments for that unpaid overtime. So I think that's what I mean around that whole cultural difference, because it's a change. We've got into a habit of just being able to call whenever we want. We're not going to be able to do that, or some of our employees will go, I'm not taking that call.
And what are some of the potential penalties employers are liable for if they disregard these new laws?
Well, first and foremost, they want them to try and resolve it at the workplace. But if that's not able to happen, either party, either the employer or the employee, can actually take a complaint to Fair Work. And then at that point, they will try and conciliate as well. But if they aren't able to, they can order financial penalties. And they can be quite significant, because at the end of the day, this closing the loopholes forms part of Fair Work. And breaches to Fair Work can be a fine of up to $18,000 or $19,000 per breach for the manager, and up to $90,000 per breach for the company.
It's significant. I really hope that it starts to drive down our rates of burnout. Because as you say, there's just so many people just overworked and stressed out, and perhaps this is a mechanism of just, lightening the load a little bit. Yeah.
I think so. I think we're going to see some changes.